We begin in Bahrain, and after a pretty decent season in 2022, scratch that, good half of a season, Bahrain this year did also deliver. Aston Martin had built a good car after a mid-2022 and had also gone from a washed Vettel to Fernando Alonso with a point to prove. As the team leader, he was hit by his teammate on lap 1, but to be fair to Stroll, he had broken both of his hands or something like that. He was a man on a mission as the car had pace for a podium but was down in 6th place. He outraced George Russell in that disgusting green coloured Mercedes, overtook Bottas who was in 6th in the Alfa Romeo, how? And then he announced he was back as he battled hard with Lewis and then sent Hamilton for a vegan burger as he overtook him at the notorious hairpin. Potentially the overtake of the season in just the first race. He overtook Sainz to take P4 and ended in 3rd place as Leclerc's Ferrari broke down to take an incredible podium. Alonso was back and fighting at the top. A great first race even though Max won by over 10 seconds to his teammate in a Red Bull 1-2. In our title fight, Albon takes first blood as he claimed a big 25 points in front of Gasly, who went from last to 9th, and Bottas in 8th for Alfa Romeo. As we travel a short distance to Jeddah, Williams are first with Mercedes 2nd and Alpine 3rd thanks to Gasly. In Saudi, Alonso qualified 2nd and took the lead from Perez straight away to lead the race. Verstappen was down in the pack after his car failed in qualifying, and Stroll was going ham on lap 1 as he went around the outside of the spoon curve wannabe into P3. Stroll would then retire as his car died on him in the middle of a really good Grand Prix. Our championship leader Albon had a brake failure halfway through the race and a great fight went on for the honours of 10th place as Magnussen and Tsunoda scrapped. In the end, Kevin got that 10th place with Gasly and Ocon scoring good points for Alpine in 8th and 9th. Gasly leads Albon and Magnussen in the championship with 36 points, with Russell and Sainz also in the top 5. Australia saw Verstappen go from pole to 3rd on lap 1 as Hamilton and Russell both got ahead. Leclerc retired himself on lap 1 and so it was a safety car with the Mercedes cars 1-2. After a very good weekend for Williams, Albon threw it away at turn 6 which gave us another safety car. This then became a red flag but not before Russell pitted and dropped to 7th. The drivers who didn't pit reaped the rewards as the red flag gave them a fresh tyre change with Tsunoda and Hülkenberg gaining the most. Gasly was also 4th. Russell then retired on the main straight with a smoky engine, and as the race entered its final stages, Magnussen lost a tyre after lightly clipping the wall, and just like that, there was another red flag, leaving us with a couple laps to race flat out. The order before the restart though was Verstappen, followed by Hamilton, Alonso, Sainz, Gasly, Stroll, Perez, Norris, Hülkenberg and Ocon. Looking good for Alpine, right? Well, explain this. Yeah, all hell broke loose on the restart and this left us with Alonso at the back of the grid, Sargent punting De Vries, a French civil war and Stroll cooking it in the gravel. But it wasn't done there. I didn't watch this race live because I fell asleep halfway through, but due to some rule, the order was reinstated from the restart the lap before, with Alonso going back up to 3rd, Stroll keeping his position, but without the Alpines, Sainz would get a 5-second penalty for his crash with Alonso even though the order was reinstated and so technically that didn't happen, but still, he dropped out of the top 10 with Tsunoda inheriting the big points and Zhou getting 18 in 9th. Piastri recorded his first points finish at his home race, but Gasly stays on top, followed by 3 drivers on 25 points thanks to their individual 10th place finishes. It's Haas in 2nd behind Alpine who stay 1st, and Mercedes are 3rd, 1 point back from the Americans. It's very close in the standings though, with 9 teams all having more than 25 points, and Red Bull not even being that far back despite winning the first 3 races. After that crazy end, you'd think Baku would continue the madness. Well, first there was a sprint with Verstappen tangling with Russell and calling him a dickhead, and Stroll taking max points from Hamilton and Alonso. This brings Mercedes and Aston very close to Alpine and doesn't really affect the driver's standings. Leclerc got an impressive pole but was powerless to the Red Bulls who finished 1-2 in the end. Perez got lucky with a VSC coming out a lap after Max pitted and so won the race. This VSC was caused by who else but Nick De Vries, who was not having a great start to his full-time F1 career. But it ended with his teammate claiming back-to-back wins in another 10th with Norris 9th and Russell 8th. Gasly was back in 14th, but to be fair to him, he was only 8 seconds off 10th place. This puts Yuki in 1st, 12 points ahead of Russell, who was another 2 ahead of Gasly, and Stroll tied on 36. Mercedes go top of the constructors with Aston also jumping Alpine, who were only 1 ahead of AlphaTauri. Next was Miami, and it's probably best that we skip through this one, because it was pretty bad. I mean, Max came from 9th to 1st after Perez started 1st, and Magnussen had an amazing fight with Leclerc in a Haas. He would finish 10th, but ahead of him was a good comeback as Ocon and Gasly secured the 2nd and 3rd best possible results. Tsunoda finished 11th for the 3rd time this season, being only 2 seconds behind Magnussen in the end. This result puts Gasly back on top in the standings, but it's close as Tsunoda and Magnussen both have 50 points, and Russell was 6 back in 4th. Mercedes is still on top in the constructors, but only by 5 points to Alpine. Are Mercedes really that bad that they're fighting with Alpine in the mid-championship? After Miami, we had Monaco, and an incredible qualifying saw Verstappen snatch a pretty much guaranteed pole from Alonso through the power of driving his car like how you would in a Forza game. This meant it was Verstappen, Alonso, and then Ocon in 3rd. Late in the race, Aston Martin strategist fumbled Alonso's best chance for win by not going to wets as it rained, and with cars skating on and off the track, it ended with Piastri getting 25 points, with Norris 9th for a 43-point weekend. Gasly did score again in 7th, and so he goes 9 points clear of Russell, Leclerc and Sainz, who are all tied on 52 points. Mercedes have their 3-point advantage cut down to just 2, and Ferrari and McLaren are closing in on the top spots. In Spain, Lando qualified 3rd on the grid before he threw it away 2 corners in by crashing into Hamilton. We got a few decent battles down in the midfield, but it was a pretty boring one compared to 2022. Verstappen won by 24 seconds and Russell came from 12th through to 3rd. But in our championship, Gasly claimed max points with Zhou 9th and Ocon 8th. Gasly goes very clear out in front with 88 points, and Sainz inherits 2nd from Russell for Ferrari. Mercedes finished high in the race and were punished, with Alpine going from 2 points behind to 32 in front after Spain, and Ferrari and McLaren aren't too far back themselves. Canada now, and while Max ran away, we had a great battle years in the making between Hamilton and Alonso. Just ignore Hungary 2021. Hülkenberg actually qualified 2nd after a crazy qualifying, but would go down to 5th at the race start and then 15th by the end of the race, as that Haas was god awful at everything to do with tyres. Russell had a big moment chasing Lewis and Fernando and ruined his race because of it. De Vries had a big moment overtaking a car and destroyed his and Magnussen's race. Albon, however, drove a brilliant race, showcasing his incredible defensive driving as he got 7th place, with the train behind him including both Alpines and a few other cars. It ended with Bottas claiming max points as Stroll overtook him on the line, with Ocon 8th. Gasly was down in 12th, less than a second off the points, and so Sainz stays 2nd and now only 20 points behind Gasly, but with another Frenchie behind him as Ocon had 67 points. Alpine outscored Mercedes again as they have now been overtaken by Ferrari. Hülkenberg was in the right place at the right time in the Austria sprint, as with it being a damp start and the Red Bulls trying to kill each other, he moved up into 2nd place in a Haas. Hülkenberg defended very well for almost half the race before Perez finally got past, and as they switched to dries, Haas did the best they could, which ended in Hülkenberg finishing in 6th place. But with Russell 8th and Ocon 7th, Gasly was way out of the points, and so they close up further, with Esteban only being 14 back from his teammate. Alpine is still very clear of Mercedes as they get back ahead of Ferrari, and Aston Martin score with 2 cars to move within 2 points of the Scuderia. An eventful sprint meant for an equally eventful race. Oh wait, Max won again. He was literally warming his tyres up for a fastest lap attempt with Leclerc on the same straight as him. You can't make this shit up. It was a race of track limit penalties, as Hülkenberg even got a warning for breaking down off track. Magnussen and De Vries went at it again, and our midfield really delivered again. But because of all those penalties, we were unsure what the final result even was, as Gasly finished 9th on track before dropping back to 10th thanks to a 10-second penalty. Maybe he was thinking of the real championship. Stroll finished 9th again, and Hamilton was 8th with Russell 7th for Mercedes. This means we have another new driver in 2nd place, as Stroll overtakes Sainz and Gasly stays on top, now 27 points clear. Alpine are scoring regularly and so stay clear of Mercedes 40 points up the road, and now Aston Martin are 3rd, 6 points behind Mercedes. In Silverstone, we had a new challenger in the top 4. McLaren. They introduced an upgrade package which took them from midfield strugglers to race leaders, as Norris beat Verstappen off the line with Piastri 3rd. Max would retake the lead 5 laps in, but it was a good run. Piastri had a nailed on P3 stolen by Hamilton as he got lucky with a VSC, with Norris and Lewis sharing a good battle. Near the end of this one, Gasly was running in P10 and fighting with Sainz. After being overtaken at Copse down the inside, he dropped back and into the clutches of Lance Stroll, his championship challenger at the moment. And the first chance he got, he took it as he went off track, drove into the side of Gasly and gave him a puncher, dropping him to the back of the grid. 25 massive points went begging, and with that, Sainz got them all and was now only 7 points behind Pierre. Ferrari actually got max points for the weekend by being so bad, and with those 43 points, They cut down Alpine's gap to second to just 15 as Ocon retired early on with an oil leak. Hungary had some surprises in qualifying. Well, first off, De Vries was dropped after 10 races and 2 before the summer break in favour of Daniel Ricciardo. But the surprise in qualifying, apart from Hamilton getting pole, was the Alfa Romeos as Zhou qualified 5th and Bottas 7th. But on the line, he stalled F2 style and then crashed into Ricciardo at turn 1. Hamilton also went from pole to 4th in the span of half a lap. Zhou's little tap on Ricciardo put him into the back of Ocon, who had nowhere to go but on top of his teammate. This retired both Alpines on the first lap to make it 2 double retirements in 2 races. But apart from Perez and Russell coming through the grid, it was an average race as Max won by 33 seconds to Norris and Aston Martin claimed max points in 9th and 10th. Sainz and Leclerc were 8th and 7th though, and Carlos goes ahead of Gasly, Stroll comes within 2 points of him, and Ferrari and Aston jump Alpine, being separated by just 3 points. Oscar Piastri really announced himself in Belgium as he was just 11 milliseconds off taking pole from Verstappen and took the lead as half the grid pitted for Inters in the sprint. The ones on wets were typically the second choice drivers, and so Pierre Gasly was a great beneficiary as he went up to 3rd place. This result was helped by Hamilton and Perez crashing into each other and Alonso binning it in the gravel. Eventually Max got back ahead of Piastri because of the safety car, but he still drove very well. In the end, Mercedes got the maximum points, which bring them level with Alpine as Pierre got only 3 points. This didn't help him in the driver standings though, because Sainz outscored him by 1. With his 8 points, Russell becomes the 4th driver to break 100 points though, as he's from the lead. It was a boring main race as Max won by 22 seconds to Perez and then Leclerc. But it was big for our title as Sainz, due to turning in on Piastri at turn 1, retired with damage, which allowed Stroll to finish 9th and take the lead of the championship. Gasly would miss out on 10th by 3 seconds thanks to Tsunoda, and with this, Aston Martin reclaimed the lead of the constructors, but they are still level with Ferrari. But after that boring showing in Belgium, F1 was back with a banger after the summer break because we were in Zandvoort. It started dry, but rain was scheduled to come in a few minutes after the start. But instead of that, it came halfway around the first lap, which prompted some to pit for wets, while some elected to stay on the slicks. Perez was one of those that went straight to the Inters, with Zhou and Gasly eventually following Perez in 2nd and 3rd. Verstappen would pit afterwards before catching up to Perez and overtaking him. He didn't lose the race lead after this. It was soon time to switch back to dry tyres, but with more rain coming, it was all about how you gamble. But of course, Sargent didn't get that far as he was in the wall. That rain cloud didn't come straight away, but it did come with 10 laps to go, which caused chaos. It was full wet conditions, and while everyone went for Inters, Ocon chose the extreme wets, which almost certainly would have gained him a lot of time and maybe even got him in the podium positions. But his genius decision was ruined by Perez, Bottas, Tsunoda and finally Zhou, who all aquaplaned at turn 1. This became a red flag as it was too wet to race, and so we had to wait for the rain to go away. But just before Zhou crashed, Perez had pitted and was caught speeding in the pit lane. With 5 laps to go, this left Gasly with a perfect opportunity to steal P3 off of Perez. And sure enough, he did, with it ending Verstappen in 1st, Alonso in 2nd and Gasly in 3rd. Great for him in real life, but this was bad for his title chances in our championship. He would only get 4 points while his teammate got 25. Probably a good thing then that his full wet gamble didn't pay off, because it takes him from 8th in the championship up to 4th, 6 points behind his teammate. Sainz outscored Gasly again, and so with Stroll finishing 11th, just 2 seconds behind Ocon, he now takes the lead of the championship. Alpine go 2 points in front of Ferrari with Aston Martin 5 points back, and Mercedes another 10 behind heading into Monza. The Ferraris would sandwich Verstappen in 1st and 3rd as Sainz got pole and held onto it for 15 laps through some great defending. Until he made a mistake. Max didn't look back after that. Perez would then come through and do the same as Red Bull secured the 1-2. Other events in this race, Albon drove well to another P7, Hamilton basically retired Piastri and got barely any punishment for it, and Sargent torpedoed Bottas, but yet he still finished P10, grabbing maximum points for Alfa Romeo. Ocon retired on lap 39 with a steering issue, Gasly and Stroll were 15th and 16th on the road, and Sainz scored P3 and 4 more points as he had an amazing fight with Leclerc for the podium. This puts him 8 points clear of Stroll. Russell, Alonso and Hamilton all jump Ocon as well. Aston Martin go back on top by 3 points thanks to Alonso, and it's a gap of 11 points down to 4th place Alpine. Oh yeah, and Max got 10 consecutive wins this race, but we don't really care because he got 10 points over the course of 10 races. Not very impressive if you ask me. Singapore is next up on the cards, and after breaking the once unbeatable record set by Vettel, Red Bull were ready to the bed on one of their only weak tracks. Verstappen was knocked out in Q2 by the stand-in AlphaTauri driver Liam Lawson, who replaced Ricciardo after he broke his hand in Zandvoort. This meant it was the only chance for someone other than Red Bull to win a race, and Ferrari jumped at this. They qualified first and third like in Monza with Sainz on pole. Stroll also wasn't in the race because he did an ultimate shag into the barriers in Q1. Sargent crashed again and broke his front wing, leading to a full-scale safety car. After having a great fight with Alonso and driving a good race in 6th, Ocon broke down at turn 1. This brought out the VSC and made both Mercedes pit for fresh tyres to go and chase down Norris and Sainz in the lead of the race. The Mercedes already had some pace, so with 17 laps to do it, could they actually make it work? Well, when they did eventually catch up, they were stumped by the big brain of Carlos Sainz, who cleverly used Norris as a buffer by constantly and purposefully giving him DRS every lap. This all culminated in what we like to call the bottle. Russell was in 3rd but then crashed out of the race on the last lap, gifting the podium to Hamilton and the win to Sainz. This gave 10th place to 11th place Magnussen and a brilliant 9th for Liam Lawson. Perez was down in 8th, but Gasly finally scored some decent points again as Sainz only got 1 for winning. This means that he regained 2nd in the championship and is now only 8 behind Carlos, with Ferrari getting back on top in the constructors by 4 points. The gap between the top 4 teams is now only 9 points. The AlphaTauris had a great battle on the first lap in Japan, but apart from Perez and Sargent staging their own missile attacks on Magnussen and Bottas, not too much happened. But with Sainz finishing 6th, he never would have thought that Gasly finishing 10th would be such a big issue for him. Pierre regained the lead of the championship by 7 points to Sainz, with Ocon moving up to 3rd thanks to his 9th place finish. This is also very good for Alpine as their 43 points now take them 22 in front of Ferrari. Alonso's 8th place finish also brings Aston Martin level with Mercedes and 5 behind Ferrari. We had another sprint in Qatar with Piastri winning his first event in F1 because it technically isn't a race, Perez fighting in the midfield and then getting caught up in a 3-car crash, and Fernando Alonso getting max points in 8th place. Albon was 7th for Williams and Sainz was 6th, with Gasly 6/10 off of Alonso in 8th. This put Sainz just 1 point behind Pierre going into the race on Sunday, with Alonso suddenly being in the mix. Alpine stay well clear, but the gap from 2nd to 4th is just 3 points. But there was a big shock coming on Sunday because Carlos Sainz would not even make it to the grid due to a fuel leak. It was probably the better for his personal health considering what would happen in this sweltering race, but definitely not good for his championship challenge. At turn 1, the Mercedes cars crashed into each other, sending Hamilton out of the race and Russell to the back of the grid. This was a good race, but it was marred by half the grid getting heat stroke, Sargent withdrawing from the race near the end, Ocon throwing up in his helmet, Stroll said he was passing out in the high-speed corners, and Albon fainted after the race. Yeah, hosting a race in the Middle East in October is not a very smart move. Because of the insane heat, this obviously led to the drivers not fully respecting track limits, and so there was a lot of moving around. The original finishing order from 6th downwards was Alonso, Ocon, Bottas, Stroll, Gasly, Perez, Zhou, and then Albon. But after the penalties, Zhou moved up to 9th, Stroll dropped out of the points to 11th, and Gasly was shoved all the way back down to 12th, leading to Perez finishing 10th after he only got 1 5-second penalty, while the others got 2. Sainz's position in 1st was up for the taking this weekend, but all that's happened is everyone else has closed up. Alonso is now only 6 points off the lead and Ocon is 11 behind. Alpine are still 20 points out in front, but it's so close between the teams behind them. The sustainable F1 calendar then went from Asia to America as Austin was ready to serve us the dullest race of all time. A boring sprint saw Russell claim max points, but with Gasly 7th and Sainz 6th. This extends his lead out in front by 1 point, with Russell now 3rd in the standings and Alpine 18 points clear in front. In the main race, it was better, as Ocon was involved in a lap 1 incident with Piastri which retired both of them after a few laps. Verstappen started down in 6th and so had to fight his way up to the front, and this came on lap 28, halfway into the race. He was having some issues with his brakes, and so Hamilton was actually able to keep up and challenge him for the win. I mean, he was 2 seconds back by the end of the race, but I'd still call that a challenge in this type of dominant season. Originally, our 8th, 9th and 10th finishes were Gasly, Stroll and Tsunoda, but with Hamilton and Leclerc getting disqualified for skid block illegalities, the Williams drivers in 11th and 12th were gifted a max point weekend. Logan Sargent has actually got points on the board, finally. And so this gives Gasly 10 points instead of 15 and 12 instead of 18 for Stroll, but I'm sure they don't care that much because Sainz only got 4, meaning Gasly is now 8 points clear with Russell closing in on Carlos. Alpine are keeping that 20-ish point gap with Mercedes, Ferrari and Aston closer than ever before. Mexico now, and apart from Perez trying to be a hero at turn 1 and paying the price, This was a very boring one, but like every boring race, this only means it was great for our championship. Sainz would go from 2nd on the grid to 4th at the end of the race, but Ocon was 10th with Gasly 4 seconds back in 11th. It shouldn't even have been Esteban in 10th either, as Tsunoda threw himself out of a guaranteed P8 and finished 12th. With Gasly scoring no points and Ocon getting 25, this puts Sainz back within 2 points, but Ocon within 3. This point system really highlights the impact 1 10th place can have, because Ocon has struggled to finish recently, but by finishing right in the middle of the order just once, he's really now in contention. And don't count out Russell either in 4th place, just 1 point further back. These are definitely our 4 challengers as we go into the final few races. In the Constructors, it's more clear cut as Alpine are 35 points in front of Mercedes. Sao Paulo had another sprint for us, but this one was actually amazing. We got incredible battles between all of our title challengers, but unfortunately for them, it was in positions way out of the points. Sainz battled with Ricciardo for the max points in 8th and got it by 2 tenths at the line, meaning he retakes the lead of the championship, with Russell tying it up with Gasly in 2nd and 3rd. Alpine are probably too far out of reach at this point, but Ferrari won that 2nd at the minimum, with Mercedes just 2 points ahead going into the main race. Leclerc had a hydraulics failure on the formation lap, and then Magnussen and Albon had a first lap crash at turn 1. The debris coming from the crash affected Ricciardo and Piastri, giving them damage and nearly took out Ocon were it not for his quick reactions. Compared to the sprint, this Brazilian race was for some reason not that great, but we got some spice late on in the race. Mercedes had been struggling all weekend with cooling and so were low in the points. Russell was running in 9th before dropping out of the points and then retiring with these issues, which is a massive missed chance for him and Mercedes. This meant that Ocon claimed another P10 finish, and even though Gasly and Sainz scored, they could not compete with his 25 points, as it's now Ocon leading from Sainz and then Gasly. Alpine have all but nearly secured the Constructors title, but with 2 races to go, anything can happen. Las Vegas was a mess of a weekend. First, Sainz hit a manhole cover in practice, which meant he had to take new engine components, which would cost him a 10th place grid penalty and meant they abandoned FP1's running. The second session was delayed by 2.5 hours while they checked all the other manhole covers. After Gasly qualified, the Williams got P6 and P7, Bottas finished 8th and Magnussen was 9th. We were set up for a crazy race. Max pushed Leclerc off track at turn 1 and got a penalty. Alonso and crucially Sainz spun at the same corner before Norris binned it after 2 laps. The rest of our title contenders all kept it clean meanwhile. Hamilton and Piastri couldn't keep it clean though, as Lewis hit Oscar and they both got punctures. If he was already out of the fight, Russell definitely was now, as he didn't leave Max any room and got big damage because of it. The insane amount of debris led to a full safety car coming out, giving Perez, Sainz, Ocon, Russell and Stroll a golden opportunity for a free pit stop. Perez would actually take the lead in the race before Ocon and Gasly had a great fight in 5th and 6th. Leclerc got back past Perez and we had a 3-way fight for the lead before Verstappen got ahead of Charles and didn't look back. On the final lap, Leclerc sent an incredible dive bomb past Perez to take 2nd, but it was a big result for the championship. Ocon finished 4th to claim 6 points, but Sainz was down in 7th to get 10, meaning the top 2 were separated by 2 points going into the finale in Abu Dhabi. Russell's P8 still leaves him with a chance to get the championship should results go his way, and Gasly is also technically in the fight, although he could have done with finishing 10th instead of 11th. Alpine are 25 points in front of Mercedes and are almost there, with the Silver Arrows being the only team left who can win it in the Middle East. Going into the final race, in order for Sainz to win, he must outscore Ocon by 3 points. If Russell wants to win, he must outscore Ocon by 14 points, and if Gasly stands any hope of winning, he must outscore his teammate by 17 points. Bring on the title decider. For the final race of the season, our contenders lined up as follows: Russell in 4th, Gasly in 10th, Ocon in 12th and Sainz down in 16th. He missed out on Q2 by 3 tenths, but it didn't help that he crashed in practice on Friday. On lap 3, Russell would move down a place to 5th, Gasly was up to 8th and Ocon and Sainz were still out of the points. Abu Dhabi obviously was a boring race, and with 12 laps to go, Russell was 3rd, showing good pace, and so was basically out of the fight. Sainz had managed to claw his way up to 9th place, and both Alpines were out of the points. The issue was, Sainz's car had no pace, and so Hamilton soon passed him to drop down to 10th place with 10 laps left to go. Ocon was 4 seconds back, and so as it stood, Sainz would win the title by 23 points with a massive points haul when it really counted. But incredibly, with just 1 lap to go, Sainz retired in the pits. Ferrari had tried a long opening stint to try and get lucky with the safety car, but it had never come, and so that meant, apart from Russell scoring 4 points in 3rd, none of the championship contenders scored, meaning Ocon won thanks to his performance in Las Vegas. A very anticlimactic ending, but one that happened due to this point system not being real. This also means Alpine didn't score any points, but luckily for them, they survived by 3 points to Mercedes and then Aston Martin, who overtake Ferrari on the final day thanks to a 37-2 point score in Abu Dhabi. Hamilton would sneak ahead of Gasly after the final race, and Alonso was separated by 1 point to his teammate behind and was very close to Gasly in 5th. Going down to the bottom of the standings, Lawson and Hülkenberg are tied on 18 points, with Ricciardo scoring the least out of everyone, apart from Nick de Vries of course. And although it wasn't the ending you probably would have wanted, with none of our drivers scoring in the final race, I can tell you the 2021 season with this point system definitely didn't disappoint, and it's on screen right now.